Where do you think you got the confidence from?
Writing the book, I realized how insecure I was as a child. I believe I was very secure and confident as a young child. And over time, as it happens in our culture and society, people kept commenting either on my looks. Of course, I was a brown girl with Asian eyes in a white world. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Canada, Western Canada. I stood out. And so I lost some confidence. I was constantly putting myself in places where I didn't quite belong. And then the confidence came when I realized that that belonging is within me and that who I was as a little girl before I got asked all the questions
Mm.
of who are you, what are you, that was the confidence that was in me the entire time. And it was a matter of just pulling her back out.
Welcome to the 51%, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get back to basics when it comes to women's health. Through expert insights and powerful personal stories, we help you tune in to what really matters: your body, your well-being, your life. No one-size-fits-all advice, just real conversations to help you understand your health on your own terms. But before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and join the 51% community on our website. It's free and it helps us grow, reach more women, and create events that really speak to the health and wealth challenges we all face. And finally, just so you know, everything shared on this podcast is for information only. It's not medical or financial advice, and always speak to a qualified expert for support. Serena, welcome to the podcast. It is fabulous to have you on. I cannot wait to have this conversation. I received your book all the way from Costa Rica, and I am on the last chapter, which is actually quite amazing. Could you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are, your journey? We'll delve into your book as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreya, for having me here. That's really such an honor to be here. And I love having these conversations. This is why I wrote the book. So my name is Serena Arora. I'm an Ayurvedic health practitioner, a yoga therapist. I've been a yoga therapist for over 25 years. I do, like you said, I live in Costa Rica. I have a wellness retreat center there where we see hundreds of people all the time and that are coming to change their lives or transform in some ways, or just reset, take a break, or experience something new. And I love being able to provide them a space and a container in which to do that because I have lived the same thing. I needed a place and a space and tools to be well again and to find myself. I'm born in Canada to a Chinese mother and an Indian father. And so as a mixed heritage background, I've straddled many worlds all at the same time sometimes. And I have been asked my whole life, what are you? And so it's interesting when people ask me to introduce myself because the identity that I feel that I was never really formed or shaped for me. It's been something that I have grown to build over time. And so my identity was often based on external successes, on external validations, on accolades, on achievements, what I did, my career, how I was in relationship, all of those things that defined who I was. And yet what I came to realize after 50 some years was that who I am was who always was on the inside, but it was buried under shame, under seeking belonging, under looking for external validation, all of the things that when I was younger, I hid, I buried it myself, because it was in this vein or in this attempt to fit in a world that I really did not fit in. And it's so interesting where it took me. So from Canada, I moved to the US, lived in the US for a few years, and then eventually kept moving south down to Costa Rica. So here I am writing this book and allowing all of my memories to come to the forefront. And what I realized was this beautiful journey that I've been on was not a linear path. And I really wanted to write it down and so that other people who are experiencing growth and transformation and change in their seasons and struggle, that they realize that they're not alone. That I got to where I am, not because it was an easy path and a linear road that I took. It had cycles of burnout. I had different relationships, different careers. I reinvented myself over and over and over again in order to learn the lessons and then become the woman that I knew I was, that I could be, and yet that I was struggling under the layers of conditioning that I had that I'd learned over time, that I realized that I could break this cycle. I could break the conditioning. I could let it go. I could drop what I call the immigrant backpack and all of that. And I'm still to this day practicing that walk. And I know now I'm on the right path. I was taking different paths and I would, shift and change and find another path. But now that I know the path that I'm on is the right one for me, now I'm starting to really use my strength, my internal wisdom, my immigrant, I call it, which I coin in the book, to put one foot in front of the other along this path that I know is right for me.
I know that you have been on a journey for sure, but reading the book, I've got such a detailed description of a lot of different things. And we are in completely opposite ends of the world, but I can still relate to quite a lot. We've grown up very differently. We have different experiences and everything, but I related to so much of it, which is why I was kind of glued to the book, really. I just want to talk about two of the terms in the book because I'd never heard of the terms before. And yet, when we spoke about it and when I read the book, I got it. And I thought, that is exactly what it is. So can we just talk about guilt first of all? Because I want to understand what exactly is that and why would people from immigrant backgrounds especially have that? Because it can really, really make or break your journey and your present and your future, really, I think.
Yes. Thank you for saying all that. Yeah. It's just a term that came to me. And as I was writing, so you haven't heard the term before because probably it's never been said before.
No, exactly.
Yeah. And it's such an ingrained feeling, like you said, for immigrant children, for children of immigrant parents who have grown up not really understanding or knowing the world that their parents grew up in, and their parents not really understanding or knowing the world that they are growing up in, their children are growing up in. So there is this gap that I call the culture chasm. And it is the gap in between us that where there are as many misunderstandings that even you think about English is not their first language. And so for my parents, and so they wouldn't even know terms that I was speaking. So we were literally speaking another language. And I'd say things that they just didn't really get. They didn't really understand. And so I had to explain it and then they still didn't understand it. And so this cultural gap, this generational gap, even if you're the same culture, if you're different generations, look at the kids today. They speak like, I don't even know if they're speaking English,
Yeah.
And so it's already hard to understand your kids. And so there's this extra layer that kids of immigrant parents have to work through. And so in all of that is experience of guilt. And whether it's we put it in our backpacks ourselves or it's being put in our backpacks, we are carrying a very heavy load. And it is also our decision on whether or not we continue to carry that load. And so I talk about in my book this guilt that I took on that my parents had sacrificed so much for me, for their family. They left their own immediate families. They left their own support networks. They traveled the world. They had what I called immigrant, which is the second term, that just kept putting one foot in front of the other, no matter what. And there's a part of me that felt guilty for the fact that they actually just handed this life over to me. Here it is. Here's the roof over your head. Here's the food on the table. Here's the education, here's the extracurricular activities, here's the experience of travel at your fingertips. Whatever it is that I wanted, it felt that I had. Yes, I had gratitude for that because I knew what they gave up or how hard they had to work to get to this place. And there was also pieces of guilt that I carried that were my own that I put there. They didn't necessarily layer that on top of me, that I chose to hold and to carry because somehow I didn't feel successful in their eyes, or that was doing the right thing, or I was becoming the kind of adult that they expected. So the expectations.
I guess it's hard because here you are in a country that you're born and raised in that is very, very different to where your parents came from, right? And then you're expected to figure out where you belong in this space because the narrative that's coming from your parents is very different to the narrative of where you're born. They're quite different. And then you've got to find where you fit in amongst all of that as well. And then trying to navigate that and being in a space of, well, what do? I want to do this, but then I've got all these rules because my personal experience and opinion is here you go. We've come all the way here for a brighter future for us and for you, especially education, whatever it is. But you have 100 rules as well to abide by.
Yes.
Right? Um, and then there you are looking at, I guess, a lot of people around you that aren't from immigrant families and that aren't South Asian or East Asian, that are allowed to do pretty much whatever they want.
Totally different set of.
Yeah, they have a very different set of rules. So you're
Yeah,
thinking, well, what do I do? I want to do that, but I can't do that. But shall I just do it anyway?
exactly. And there's the guilt. Because doing it anyways, or doing what feels culturally sound for us or for me, or what felt really aligned and kind of aligned to my personality, aligned to my desires, felt guilty. I felt guilty for doing that. And so I would revert back to playing it safe, playing it small, fitting in a box that I had been taught was how to be successful and how to live. And, I put successful in quotes there because for me, I became a teacher. I was like, okay, that's the safe thing. I spoke French. I'll be a French immersion teacher. And I'll be a teacher for the rest of my life and make a pension, and life is safe. And so what I realized was I was following these same patterns that my parents felt like it was their rules. And I realized that I needed to spread my wings. And when I spread my wings, I did not fit in that box. And I was bigger and my vision was bigger for me in my life. And yet every time I voiced my desire or my bigness, I was asked to be quiet. I was asked to, it was uncomfortable for them because me being bigger than they're comfortable with was so uncomfortable for them that I took that image guilt and I was like, oh, I can't make them uncomfortable. And you see that with people that it's not even their parents. It's that they make other people uncomfortable just by being themselves. And then they'll dim a piece of themselves so that other people won't be comfortable. And there's deep resentment that comes from that. There's I feel a lot of time wasted. We only have a certain number of years on this planet. And why wouldn't we want to live? Now we get the privilege to live in a way that feels expansive and aligned, and that we're contributing in a way that feels fulfilling. We get to live these fulfilling lives. And again, that there's a piece of me that feels guilty for that because my mother didn't get to do that. She wasn't of the generation where she got to make all these decisions that felt really good to her. She sacrificed a lot of herself and the women before her as well, that they have bared the brunt of that sacrifice. And I think of it today as my mom is my greatest hero, my heroine, and she is also my biggest red flag so that I can really, she's a warning signal to me of where I do not want to end up. And I'm grateful for that I get the privilege that I don't have to end up there. I have the awareness and the privilege of understanding and learning about myself in a way that she never could. She never had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so hard. You talk about being in this box, okay, and you wanted to spread your wings, but then there was guilt associated with that. But from reading your book, I felt like you still managed to spread your wings a little bit, even though it was perhaps not the thing that you should be doing.
Absolutely.
Now, there are a lot of people that don't get to spread their wings at all
Yep.
because they're scared, they're worried, they fear the consequences. There's shame involved. I hear of parents saying, you can't put shame on the family if you do X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be. How do you get past that then? Because I feel like we're kind of a bit lucky that we did get to spread our wings up to a point, right?
Mhm.
People that don't get to spread their wings at all and they just go through life in a box
Yeah.
contained and that's it, that's their life.
Yeah. I love that question. And I love that you brought it up. How do you get over that? And I mean, look, I had a personality. There are people that are in the family that I knew that with my personality, I was going to be the change maker. I was going to be the pattern breaker. In the family, in the whole family,
Mm.
I was going to be the whistleblower. I was going to be the truth teller. I was going to be the storyteller. And with this book, I knew that maybe it would ruffle some feathers, that maybe some of the family members would be like, how could she speak of this? Even my own mother asked me not to publish the book before she was dead because, she didn't want to air her dirty laundry, quote unquote. And
Yeah.
for me, this was the point. The point is to speak into the suppression and the feeling that something cannot be done or said because it is considered shameful. And so this is why the subtitle of my book is An Immigrant Daughter's Journey of Reckoning, Unraveling Shame and Reclaiming Her Worth. I didn't realize how ashamed I felt for the things that I did that I had no reason to be ashamed for, you know?
Mm.
And I have this piece of me, which is the immigrant, and that kept me going. I thank my parents for I inherited that immigrant, but I was able to use it in a way that kept me staying aligned to what I knew was true for me and having the courage to walk through that door and walk outside of the box or knock the wall down or whatever it was, or break through the box,
Mm.
break free. I I got married because I really thought that it would be less shameful for my parents if I was married to the person instead of living with the person, just living with the person. And then I ended up getting divorced, which was another whole experience of I'm bringing shame to the family. And still, I know that there is still this piece that it's like, ooh, Serena is divorced. And for me, I knew that was the right decision. It felt so liberating and true that that was what needed to happen. And when I look back and I've written the book, and that was the catalyst for this growth and this expansion and for really spreading my wings and not clipping them like I had been, and how I've been able to become the embodied woman that I am, which is freeing, like you said at the beginning, called powerful, empowering, and so grateful that I was able to take those steps and not think of it as shameful or something that I needed to do or not do. So the
Mm.
expectations to be able to let go of that gilt backpack that I was holding and to
Yeah.
like drop it so that I could fly. Yes, you can spread your wings, but if you're holding a very heavy Immigilt backpack a
Yeah.
backpack behind you full of Immigilt, it's hard to fly. And so it was letting that go and dropping it and not feeling guilty for dropping that backpack and just walking freely. And it takes courage. And that way, what I do feel is that it doesn't hold the resentment. So I was able to let go of I have nobody to blame. This is the beauty of it. the reason why I was stuck and the reason why I kept in those cycles of burnout and the cycles of trying to flap my wings with this heavy immigrant backpack was me. That was my fault. I was standing in my own way. I was putting the immigrant in the backpack. I was choosing not to drop the backpack and fly freely. And how much lighter it is now. And beautiful.
Was there an expectation that you should only marry someone from the backgrounds that you're from, as
No,
opposed to there wasn't? So you didn't
no,
have that, you didn't have that put on you by your parents that you must only marry someone that's either Indian or Chinese.
no. My parents didn't follow that rule. You know, they broke
Right.
that rule very early in
Yeah.
traditional world in the 60s. And so for
Mm.
them, they followed their hearts in
Yeah.
love and they just celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. And, that is something that I knew for them, that was never an issue. You know what
Yeah.
I will say about that is that I did marry someone who had a very similar personality to my dad. And they do say that, that it's familiar and it feels comfortable or whatever it is. And I do feel that that was my first marriage, or my marriage was for comfort in so many ways. And what I ran away from was discomfort. And what I came to realize after my divorce, which was very uncomfortable for a lot of people, for me, so much growth in discomfort. And so I had to learn, like after my divorce and as I was traveling and reinventing myself, moving to country and, recreating my life, I realized there's so much beauty and growth in discomfort. Can I just stay in this discomfort a little bit longer and experience that and then be able to transform, grow, and then fly? I think of the caterpillar. It's like it has to become this chrysalis and then metamorphosize into this butterfly to fly. And so the discomfort is needed
Mm.
and it's important. And I'm no stranger to discomfort. The way that I was raised was a very tough love, I would say. Um, and I passed that on. So I wouldn't say that's the only reason why my marriage failed. It was like there's so many reasons. And I
Yeah.
did replicate my parents' dynamic in my marriage. And so that was I do talk about that in the book. And that I, used immigrant to continue and force and push and manage the life that I felt was the life that I was supposed to have, quote unquote. And yet discomfort is out of your control. And
Yeah.
so to not have control and then be in this discomfort, that's a growth. And so you're saying, like, how do you get through it? It was like I just used my immigrant to just be like, yes, I'm using it for the right reason. I was gifted this thing. And then at the same time, forcing, pushing, controlling, manipulating, that is a very disintegrated feminine energy, which I talk about at the end of the book. And how I realized that in the discomfort is a beautiful pause. Like you cannot rush the caterpillar to become a butterfly. You can't rush that transformation. For me, it was really being in the pause and in the messiness and the discomfort and recreating all the things in my life and learning the lessons that then I was ready. Then I could emerge. And so I don't think you can rush the divine. I often say that. And I am grateful that I got to an age, I'm 52 this year. And so I'm able to look back on this incredible journey, see the patterns, see where it broke, see to how many lessons it took before I actually listened and then moved through.
Where do you think you got the confidence from?
That's a good question. Writing the book, I realized how insecure I was as a child. I rewind a little bit. I believe I was very secure and confident as a young child. I had so much awareness. I was confident about who I was. I wanted to try everything. And like I was on stage. I was very expressive. And over time, as it happens, in our culture and society, people kept commenting either on my looks or what I what I looked like. Of course, I was a brown girl with Asian eyes in a white world. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Canada, Western Canada, and it was very white city at the time, and the quadrant of the city that I lived in as well. And so I stood out, and I didn't have too many things to relate to. And so I lost some confidence as I grew in this world. I was constantly putting myself in places where I didn't quite belong. It was really interesting. I was, in French immersion. And so here I was, I'm this brown girl with Asian eyes that speaks fluent French. And it's like, what's going on here? It's a bizarre experience for some people.
Yeah.
And especially back then, in the 80s. And then I put myself in small towns. I was a city girl, and I would go and live in these really tiny small towns, and I did not belong. And I was in relationships where we were from two totally different worlds. We had not very much to relate to with each other. And again, a sense of not being relatable, not belonging in a relationship that felt that I was really seen or understood or known. I went to India to look for my roots and to see if I belonged there. And I certainly did not, with my cousins
Yeah.
and family members. They grew up in India, and they didn't understand, my Western world culture. So I was living in a totally different culture than them, grew up in a different way. And so putting myself in these places where I did not belong was the impetus to continuing to find the place that I did belong, or the location. I was looking outside of myself. And then the confidence came when I realized that belonging is within me, and that who I was as a little girl before I got asked all the questions
Mm.
of who are you? What are you? That was the confidence that was in me the entire time. And it was a matter of just pulling her back out, healing her, forgiving her for making decisions that maybe weren't in her best interest. And then that confidence started to take shape. I would say also becoming a yoga teacher. I was a fitness instructor for a long time. And that allowed me to be expressive in a way that I already was, and yes, of course I was judged still, but it was a better fit that,
Yeah.
to be expressive and exuberant in that role was actually welcomed. And so I did find some confidence in that as well.
I just think from that moment when you were a child with all that confidence and then retreating into, I guess, let's call it a box, and then refinding, your confidence and becoming who you are now. Mm, In that process, looking back, do you feel kind of resentful or any kind of, if I'd done this a lot earlier?
I wouldn't say resentment. Again, as I said earlier, you cannot rush the divine. So I do feel that even though I'm in my 52nd year of life, it's time, and that it's not too late. When I wanted to go to university, it was like, well, I want to become a journalist. I asked my mom, I'll go to journalism school. She's like, no, nobody on TV looks like you. And now how many people on TV look like me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
and so had I done that earlier, I would have probably been on the forefront of that. And I also feel like everything happens for a reason. So I wasn't supposed to be on TV at that time, and I wasn't supposed to be a journalist. But now, how I see myself learning still the skills that I didn't really have before is a beautiful thing, is that I'm able to now be so authentic in who I am, so that when I do show up on TV, or if as my voice comes out, then that way it's who it truly am. It's not something I'm performing, or it's not something that I'm
Yeah.
just saying verbatim. It's a real authentic expression of who I am. And so that kind of clipping of my wings, or going inward and really cocooning, needed to happen. And I believe that a more authentic version of myself has come out of that.
Yeah, I guess you're right in a way, because if you did pursue that journalism career, that probably still wouldn't have been your authentic self, because this is who you are. This is your true self now. And
Yeah.
back then, you probably wouldn't have been ready for that. And it's
Yeah.
a process. This is you fully aware, free, able to kind of be at peace.
And for that to come across, and this book was a part of that. It was like, I will write down. And as I was writing, it was cathartic, it was freeing, it was a very liberating experience in itself, just writing the book and being able to share my authentic, true, uninhibited expression of my experience was really important for me because I have been, a facilitator, a mentor. I've been a teacher my whole life. I've really guided people into transformation. And you can't do that unless you have really lived it in a really authentic way. And so for me, I realized that, like I said at the top of the call, it's a messy process. There is no one linear path. If there is, and you've taken it and you've gotten to exactly where you want to be, great. And there's detours that I took that have shaped me and made me who I am, that I will never regret it or feel like I wasted time or that I wish I never had. Those experiences really shaped me into this complex human that I am. And I'm also feeling really grounded and grateful for those experiences that I can guide people through their own messiness, help them realize that it's okay, that it's it's an important part of and time in their life, and that we all go through different seasons. I mean, if the seasons, like in Costa Rica, we have rainy season and dry season, and that's great. And we have 4 seasons in Canada and in Europe. So for me, it's without those seasons, Mother Nature teaches us. Mother Nature's like, here it is. This is what season are you in? And let it be the most beautiful, bountiful, abundant, and learn a season from which you can learn.
I guess it's also really important. You go through your life like in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And a lot of women, myself included, when you get to your 40s, you have this big revelation and you're kind of, oh my God, I don't want to take that crap anymore. And I'm fed up of all this. And I'm, whatever that revelation is. But I feel like some of that, yes, you have a revelation and you're in that season of your life and you look at it with in detail and really try and make the changes that you need to make. And that's if you do that, right? Because people don't take the time out to do that. But what if you took the time out in your 20s and 30s and 40s earlier, take that time out to really discover, who am I? What do I want? What am I trying to achieve in this world, in this life that I have, as opposed to doing it like in your 40s and 50s and then getting pissed off about it.
Yeah, that is the work. We also have the tools and the opportunity to do that right now. We have so much information at our disposal, so much learning that can happen in the last 10 years has been exponentially, our intellect, our resources have been just exploded exponentially. I think about in our teacher training, some of the younger people, in their 20s, the women or the people that are in their 40s and 50s, they're looking back, they're like, man, if only I was your age and I had had this experience, this resource, this learning, this awareness when I was your age. And so I think it's happening more and more. And we don't give maybe the younger generation enough credit that they're still absorbing a lot that's going on around them. And my hope is that they're having the important conversations like these. They're reading the right things and they're looking at the future generations or the generations ahead of them as red flags, as the learning, as the billboards that are saying, hey, this is what is lying ahead of you. So like I did with my mother, I'm like, I saw what was waiting for me. And it was, how do I break this? And how do I take my learning, what I've learned from my life and the tools that I have and the resources that I've been given to make sure that that doesn't become my outcome as well. And so I wrote my book because for my niece. And like, I don't have children of my own. So to pass down something, a lesson that I could see was happening, the same patterns were happening with my niece, and how much my niece is so much like me, and how I wanted her to live or have a different experience and be able to spread her wings earlier, to walk a path with unbound feet, earlier. And because she did inherit the same binding that comes in my lineage. So I don't know if I mentioned, so the reason why my book is called Unbound is because my Chinese mother's grandmother's feet were bound in China. And then my grandmother escaped that same fate. My mother also escaped that. And then, in essence, I did as well. And yet, we're walking on these very tightly bound, unbound feet of fear and doubt and trepidation and staying in the box and staying small. The bound feet is to stay small.
Yeah.
Literally to stay small. And so how was my niece staying small and playing small and being quote unquote safe, playing it safe, and how I had done that same thing. And where for her, I really wanted her to learn earlier that her bigness and her expressiveness, and even if it makes other people uncomfortable, to be that uninhibitedly, unabashedly, to be herself in this world. And, she's read my book and she's really resonated with it. And I see her. She was just graduated now, high school. She was a runner up for valedictorian and she spoke to her school. And, I'm just loving seeing her in her bigness. And so I feel like my work is done.
No, it's not done until a lot of more people read the book. From reading the book myself, I it's made me realize that actually there were times in my life, like you, I was free, and there were times in my life where I wasn't free. And now I've finally found that freedom again. We talked about being bound, and being unbound is when you are free. You're free from all of that, and you can be who you are and express who you are and have the freedom to enjoy life, like, finally.
Yeah, absolutely. And how, again, we get to do that. We are of the generation, we're really the first generation that we get to be that unbound and to live that way. Whereas the generations of women, especially before us, did not have that same privilege. I
No.
mean, they couldn't own bank accounts, without a second signature. They couldn't have careers necessarily. And it was, my parents are of the silent generation. And so these women I really see as they had stayed silent. And so I believe we've swung the opposite way. So now it went from the silent to like loud and kind of forceful. And like I call it in the last chapter of my book, I call this femigrit, because it's kind of this disintegrated feminine energy that is like pushing and like, I'm so important and listen to me. And it's very loud. And there's something in between. So from that extreme to being silent, to being like femigrit, like controlling, I'm going to control everything in my life. That's a very, like I said, disintegrated feminine, but very almost like a masculine energy where it's forcing, it's doing, it's controlling. And what I really feel is the most powerful is what's in the middle of that. And as women, we have this innate sense of feminine wisdom that lives deep within our bodies. It's in our wombs. It's in our guts. It's in our hearts. And I speak about this in the book. And in order to tap into that resource of feminine wisdom that lives deep within us, we must pause. We must slow down. We must create space. Yes, we can spread our wings. We've been talking about that a lot. And it's not about flapping our wings to stay afloat. And it's really, we can close our wing, we can slow our wings down. When can we glide through life? When can we slow down and pause and maybe nest for a little while by the river or by a lake? And have our replenishing moments where we can replenish our resources of this feminine, what I call feminine waters and feminine energy. And it lives within us. When we're in our femigrit, when we're forcing and pushing and controlling and burning out and all of the things that basically deplete us of our waters, that we're leaking water, we're leaking energy, we're leaking any kind of wisdom that we have, then we have to pause even more to replenish that. And this is the burnout. This is where we are pushing ourselves to a limit that we were never meant to go. We weren't meant to keep flapping our wings and then never landing on a branch, or never sitting in a nest and creating a nest and then feeding ourselves and then our nestlings. Our deepest wisdom of feminine wisdom lies in nurturing. And whether that is taking care of yourself or others, we must have abundant resource in that space of feminine wisdom. We must stay fulfilled in that area so that we have enough to share and to give to those who need it, and especially ourselves.
I love that. I love the way you put that. I really think the problem is a lot of women and a lot of people, they do not take the time out to take that step back and evaluate what's going on in their life and what changes they may or may not need to make. People are just doing things flippantly, right? Making
Mhm.
flippant decisions instead of really thinking about, hold on a minute, what is happening to my body? What is happening around me? What is my current situation? What is my current environment? Am I happy? Is someone making me unhappy? Am I making myself unhappy? Am I tired? Am I feeding myself properly? Like, what's going
Mm.
on? People don't do that.
Right.
So many people don't do that. And they think they do because they think, right, I'm going to take some time out and have a bath. But that's not
The
what
same.
this is.
Right, right. I love this. Yes, this is the conversation. And this is the conversation of self care. Even though self care is a word and a term that is so overused, and like you just said,
Yeah.
it's not taking a bath, it is the pause. It is the pause in every given moment and asking yourself, what do I feel? What do I feel? And most people don't even know what they feel because we're so out of touch. We're so disconnected from our
Mm.
feelings. And when we don't know what we're feeling, then we don't know what we need. So that's the second question. What do I feel? What do I need? And then what do I shift? So, meaning, what do I shift in my own environment, in my own state, in my own mindset, so that I give myself what it is that I need? And in order for you to be fulfilled, you must give to yourself what you need first. And then you go outside of yourself. Then you find the outside resources. But if you don't give to yourself first and shift something in your mindset, your environment, your lifestyle, whatever it is that is going to respond to that need and fulfill that need, then asking for it outside of yourself is never sustainable. And so this is where the shift comes. This is where it becomes self care, self awareness, self reliance, and self accountability. Because not being accountable and relying on everyone and everything else to somehow take care of you, that is very not wise and a very immature way of
Mm.
moving through life. And then we're just consistently behaving and acting from that little girl who's like having her temper tantrum and she's wanting that love. And she's like, give me, give me, give me, give me. I want this, I want that. And so in order to be the adult woman and say, what can I give myself right now? Is really the key to feeling fulfilled in a more sustainable way. And I love what you said about the flippantness. I consider that like when you make flippant decisions, it's like we live in a really reactive society. Where everyone
Mm.
is reacting to situations, to global situations, to
Yeah.
politics, to whatever's happening in the world. It's like there's this reaction that happens.
Mhm.
And this is very detrimental to our nervous system, and it shows how far we've come in our own growth. And so those of us who react quickly out of stress response and not feeling safe, all of that, that has been programmed into us. And so the work now is to do the self-care, to start to recalibrate the nervous system, to recenter, and instead of react, how do we respond? And from a place as women of deep wisdom so that we can actually change, I believe, the world. Because once all women start acting, behaving, speaking, expressing from that deeper place of wisdom and pause and responding, then I believe we'll have a very different situation in our world.
How do we do this?
Yeah. Oh, I said all, I know. It's a big ask. Very small, very small. It's like very first steps. You
Yeah.
ask yourself, like I said, what do I feel? And to really get back in touch with our feelings. As women, we have disconnected ourselves usually from the neck down, or at least from the gut down. Why do we have gut issues? Why are we not taking care of our digestion, our elimination? We've we've disconnected ourselves from our wombs. We've stopped our menstrual cycles. We've controlled them with Femigrit using, well, I'm going to control it because I don't want it. It's inconvenient. Now, a lot of us are going through perimenopause and menopause. There's a large contingent of women who are going through this stage of life and this season of life. And as we experience challenge in perimenopause, that is our report card. I always say that, your period is your monthly report card. And if you're stopping that information from coming to you, then that is to your detriment, because now in perimenopause, as your body is trying to speak to you loudly, if it's speaking to you loudly, it's because you haven't been listening beforehand. And so women who are going through this season of life, which I am, I'm feeling really sound. I'm feeling really stable. I'm feeling really centered because I have spent years taking care of myself and listening to what my cycle had to say to me, listening to what my body had to say. And so those nuanced listening, the skills that you've created or nurtured, they come in handy because as you get on later in life, maybe your body doesn't have to speak to you so loudly if you had been listening. And that's the key, is as you're in your younger years, your 30s and 40s, start to listen to your bodies. Give yourself, what do I feel? Now, what do I need? And give yourself that. And so when you are able to move into the season of perimenopause and menopause, then you already have the habit of listening to what your body has to say. And you won't be surprised.
Give me an example of how a woman can do that when they're living a life of constantness, even if I don't even know if that's a word, right? Like constant pressure from work, constant pressure at home with your family, whether you've got caring responsibilities with kids or parents, whatever that might be, the stress of work, cooking, cleaning, like everything. Women do a lot. Okay. There is a lot of load on women and we're constantly thinking about everything and everyone. How do I even take that time out to even do that in this world of constant everything?
Great question. And there is no real easy answer. What I like to say to my clients is, and when they come and see me, they're already at a place where they're dysregulated, they're dehydrated, they're not eliminating, they're feeling stuck. And when,
By the way, sorry, I think a lot of women are in that stage.
yes,
Yeah.
we are not in flow. We have been obstructed and disconnected so that we are actually stuck and we are bound. And in order to get unbound, we must remove the blockages that are standing in the way. If you think of it in a very practical way, mouth to anus. And so mouth to anus is a channel that we ingest, we digest, we assimilate. So keeping what we need and sorting it out, that what we don't need, and then eliminating. And if we are not going through those 4 stages every single day, every single moment of every single day, and not just with food, with drinks, it is careers, your job, what's happening in your experience, reading an email, Are you ingesting? Are you digesting that email? Are you assimilating it? And are you eliminating that which does not serve you in that email? In a relationship, are you digesting that relationship? Are you able to keep what you need that from that relationship and leave what isn't yours from that relationship and eliminate what isn't yours? Are you able to be in this relationship even as a caregiver now, with my parents? Am I able to keep the flow going instead of getting so ingesting all of this like responsibility and then it all being in indigestion basically, so I can't even digest everything that I've just ingested? Even as simple as a movie that you're watching, or if you are on social media and you are ingesting and consuming something that is so that you don't have the digestive fire to consume and to digest it properly, that is telling you that you need to start to manage and be more discerning of what it is that you're ingesting. Because if you're not eliminating, like that tells you that you can't ingest more, because otherwise we're just full of shit, literally. We're full of shit. And no one likes anybody who's full of shit. And so we don't feel good. We feel shitty. And then other people also do that. And so if you were to just take a very simple thing in the morning, you could take bookends. So each woman, as they wake up in the first thing in the morning, they drink water. So I like to say hot water because it is more absorbed like a bath than if you were to take a cold shower and then your organs kind of shut down. So hot water, warm water will actually give you your organs a nice bath first thing in the morning and clear the channel. Start to like soften the organs, let the organs start to wake up and start to function a little bit better. So that's your first bookend. At the end of the day, you take the time to put your legs up against the wall and you're lying down and there's all the blood will drain from the feet, the lymph will move backwards, the valves of your veins would start to strengthen because it's trying to get blood. It's working in the opposite direction of gravity. And so these two simple things, the beginning of your day and the end of the day, that can be your container. And then when you've done that for many, many days, let's say 30 days in a row, then you start to miss that. Your body starts to crave those patterns, those habits that you have created, which are very good habits. And that will help eliminate a lot of things. At the end of the day, when you put your legs up against the wall, can you let go of all the things that happened to you that day? All the things that really, at the end of the day, do they really matter? And clearing your mind, Then of course, there's other different practices that you can do that I won't get into, but the real question is, and if I were to just keep it simple, and I keep it simple for my clients, was this thing that I'm eating, drinking, exposing myself, ingesting, whatever it is that I'm ingesting, is this thing contributing to the fabric of my well-being or is it depleting it? And that is the question that you must answer with anything, that moment to moment awareness. And if you're doing more things that are depleting you than contributing to your fabric of your well-being, then that's when you need to start to pause and to say, okay, and start to be more discerning of what it is that you're ingesting. And then those questions, that practice becomes much more innate and you start feeling better. It's a mindset, really.
I guess it also applies to people as well. So is this person making
absolutely
feel not great?
Right. Is this relationship contributing to the fabric of my well-being or is it depleting me? And, I speak about that in, I think it's chapter 13, and how depleting that relationship was for me that I didn't realize. My head wanted the relationship, but my body, no. I was dried up. I was depleted of my feminine waters. And when you're depleted of that, and when you're so bound and so rigid, and there's dams in the body that are shunting the water and not making it flow, you cannot be the best version of yourself. You will not respond. You will react. You will not flow. You will control. There's so many ways of everything that we've just spoken about that cannot happen if we are not really, if we're depleted. And so we must make that decision of doing more things in our life that contribute to the fabric of our well-being. And what is poison for you could be medicine for another. So what contributes to the fabric of your well-being might be totally different from the fabric of well-being of someone else. And so that's where we get kind of confused. That's where Ayurveda comes in. It's like, this is about you, and only you know, how does this thing make me feel? How does this person make me feel? How does this situation make me feel? How do I feel? And then to be able to get in touch with that and to be able to what I need and then what I shift is the way to keep the waters flowing.
I guess it's hard because, say, it involves food is one thing. We're talking about people now. So if I decide that this person is no good for me and therefore I need to keep a boundary or maybe not even talk to them, depending on what the right solution is. But you, on the other hand, you're fine with that person for whatever reason. But because you see I'm not fine with that person, there could be a conflict there. You might be thinking, well, what's wrong with you? Because why are you distancing yourself from that person? They're fine with me. There's nothing wrong with them. It's something wrong with you.
Okay. Great. Good. I'm glad you brought that up, because what I've been working on this last little while, maybe a few months actually, is allowing the other person to have their journey. And so for whoever you relate to, whoever you decide to be in a relationship with, that is your journey. And that I know that being in relationship with that person doesn't contribute to the fabric of my well-being. I choose to have a boundary, and yet that's your journey. And so you get to do what you want to do, and I don't have to make that about me. So I can have a good relationship with you and know that you contribute to the fabric of my well-being, and yet this other person doesn't. But you having a relationship with them, that's yours. And that's your decision. And you have to decide, does this contribute? Beautiful. And if it's family, like what you're saying now, if we're thinking about this as family members, that's where it becomes difficult and a little complicated. And what I've really done and I'm proud of is that I've set really strong boundaries, even with family members. That has been so liberating, and that you can set very strong boundaries in a very loving way, because, I've set the boundary with my dad, and I love him, and I know he loves me, and I know that I am not the best version of me when I don't have that boundary. And so for me, how do I be loving to myself as well? And so it's just putting that boundary and saying, and boundaries are not walls. And I think this is where we get very confused. It's like a wall is just like, you don't put anything out there. There's no exchange. A boundary is like, this is how far I go. And this is where you can see that I can ingest only to this point. And that's as much as I can handle to digest. And so the rest, that's yours. And then, people really respect boundaries, actually. And I've really noticed that, is that there has been a much more respect. And a boundary can sound like, the other day I just said, Dad, I need you to not tell me what to do. As simple as that. This is what I need. I need you to not tell me how I should do things, right? And say it in a very loving way. Not like, stop shooting on me, right? Like, I need you to stop telling me what I should do. And that was it. And he did.
There's not a start and a beginning. It's like you're constantly evolving. And there's always going to be that person, wherever that person is, that comes into your life at whatever moment that you might need to create a boundary with, or you might need to completely just expel, depending on who or what it is. So it's not a case of, I've solved it. It's a constant. But as long as if you're in tune with that in your body, it will come naturally, I guess.
Yes. And you are a magnet. So whatever you are feeling and how much you've grown and changed the shape of who you are, you fit. and match a very similar energy.
Yeah.
And so when I was insecure, I was attracting the insecure, right? Even more insecure. So it was, or the ones that preyed on the insecure. And so it was because it was a match. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't fully grown, and I still didn't understand or wasn't loving enough and able to take care of my little girl. It was my little girl that wanted that. And in the book, actually, I do call it, it's kind of like that inner voice, that inner judgment voice. And I called her Winona because it's like win at all costs, right? And I'm going to win this thing, and I'm going to win this person, and I'm going to win this job, whatever it is. And that's the femigrit, she's like, she's going to win. And I realized that in the winning and trying to win something or someone, boy, I lost more than I really realized, and that I ever could. I gained it back, and then it's learning a lesson. Okay, you lost in that situation, but that's okay. It's okay to lose. And it's also my mother's voice, like and it's her mother's voice and her mother's and her mother's, and there's so many women who want to win. And I think that's part of where I'll go back to that reactiveness, right? I'm going to react. I'm going to make you wrong. And that means I win. And this practice that's happening right now is like making other people wrong so that you somehow win. This is a very disintegrated. We will never get to where we want to be in humanity, as a society, as a culture, if we continue to win at all costs, because the cost is too great. Let us be who, of course, there's, Gandhi, and it's like, be the change you want to see in the world. It really is that we attract, if we're not working on ourselves, if we're not fulfilling our own needs, if we're not digesting what it is that we're ingesting, if we're not being more discerning over what it is that we take in and what shapes us, that is going to come back to us, because we will, whatever shape we are, it will come to us as a match, and we will attract in our lives.
Absolutely.
And I love that people are working on it earlier. I love that people are getting into these conversations earlier, and it's not going to happen overnight. I would say that what we're working on now, or what I'm working on now, this is for the next generation. You may never even see the result of your work, and that's okay.
Yeah. I guess you got to break the cycle, and it's so important. My kids taking one thing I say to them as pure fact and how they should live by, when the world's moved on and that doesn't really work anymore, and they're still living by those principles, that guidance, when it doesn't make sense anymore. So they need to evolve. They need to look at me and learn from things, change things up.
Whatever better means to them. My grandmother ran away from getting her feet bound. Like, that's a courage that, at 14 or however old she was, to be able to do that at her age was the best she knew how to do. And it was incredible. And my mother, the same thing, loving us in a way that she never got to be loved. And so for me, I've really realized I forgive her and I accept her for who she is, not for who I wish she had been for me. Because she did the best she could with what she had. I did that with my dad. I forgive him. I accept him for who he is, not for who I wish he had been for me. I accept her for who she is, not for who I wish she had been for me at the time. And so all of this acceptance and forgiveness is what is going to bring us back to a place of resilience and magnetic, responsive change.
That's great. Serena, honestly, this conversation has been amazing. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful I've read your book. I really am. It's kind of been an eye-opener for me as well. And it's opened stuff up for me and made me see things in a different way as well, which is a good thing. I think people that are in our generation, I think this is quite an important read, and I think everyone will find something from it for sure. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. More to come, and may the conversation continue. Thank you so much for having me, Shreya.
Thank you.